Welcome to Two Suns in the Sky, Who Lives, Who Dies. To learn more about this 3-part audiobook series, visit twosunsinthesky.com. And now, Part 3, The Survival Power of Perpetual Genesis, with author and narrator Marshall Masters.
Hello, I'm Marshall Masters, Chief Steward of the Knowledge Mountain Church of Perpetual Genesis. In Part 1 of this 3-part series, Purposeful Survival for an Enlightened Future, you learn that as a person in awareness, it does not matter if you cannot afford to buy a mountain of beans. This is because you were shown a plan on how to become a valued member of a faith-based survival community and how to profile potential tribulation leaders so that you could be worth your weight in beans. I also pointed out in the first part that we do not use the term tribulation in any biblical or judgmental sense. Rather, we use it exactly as the word tribulation is defined in the dictionary, that being a severe trial or suffering. In Part 2 of this series, Nibiru Poleshift, Who Lives, Who Dies, you learned about the 3 major causes of tribulation death: denial, procrastination, and location, and how the vast majority of humanity is destined to fall victim to these causalities, something I call failure programming, and it is the principal mechanism of denial and procrastination. An example of failure programming includes fixed outcome beliefs that completely ignore an important law of survival, that if you are not resourceful, you die. Fixed outcome beliefs are typically rooted in theories that maintain a last-minute intervention will occur. Those who subscribe to these will be moved out of harm's way at the last minute by divine beings, ancestors, extraterrestrials, multidimensional beings, and so forth. Therefore, a basic tenet of these fixed outcome beliefs is that resourcefulness is irrelevant for those willing to put all of their options into a single fixed outcome basket. To that we say, best of luck. This is why, in the final part of this 3-part series, we're going to offer an alternative to fixed outcome belief systems. I call it Perpetual Genesis, and it is much more than a philosophy. It is a cosmic tribulation toolkit for those in awareness who have committed themselves to the role of being teachers, mentors, and comforters. You will also learn specific ways to use the survival power of Perpetual Genesis to help faith-based survival community leaders to free themselves from failure programming so they can become more effective in leading their flocks to safety. I'll also share with you body, mind, and soul insights to make you an effective and beloved boots-on-the-ground member of a survival community. With this in mind, let's quickly review the survival strategy of enlightened continuity and comfort we learned about in the first part of this series. In the first part of this series, we introduced the strategy of Enlightened Continuity and Comfort, or ECC for short, which is based on the 3 founding precepts of our church. Those are self-sufficiency, hope for the future, and knowing you are not alone. Now let's bring this down to a first contact level, where you, as someone in awareness, will be a teacher, mentor, and comforter for the leadership of a survival community. Remember, as someone in awareness, you're not coming into the community from the bottom, but rather the top. With this in mind, Let us now compare these two strategies using the following three criteria: historical efficacy, survival safety, and long-term strategy. When we look at the criteria of historical efficacy, two keywords jump out at us: unproven and proven. Me and Mine strategies are based on unproven Cold War sheltering strategies, which means that there is no historical basis that proves these strategies can produce a desired or intended result. Conversely, look at a map, and the conclusion with ECC is self-obvious. What the history shows us here is that American pioneer survival strategies are proven. This is because they did produce desired and intended results. The next criteria, survival safety, is literally an apples and oranges comparison, with technology on one side and numbers on the other. For example, Me and Mine preppers rely heavily on technology to overcome the weakness of their small numbers. It is why they purchase expensive assault rifles with custom barrels, scopes, extended magazines, and so forth. Expensive state-of-the-art weapons may offer a sense of comfort, but what happens when your 14-year-old goes to sleep on guard duty with a very expensive rifle laying across his or her lap? The best case in that situation is everyone survives the nap. Worst case, you all die badly. On the other hand, you belong to a survival community of 100 people who cannot afford rifles costing thousands of dollars. Rather, your community has a mix of vintage World War II bolt-action rifles costing a few $100s for hunting and self-defense. Now imagine that you are a hostile, and you want what is in that shelter or community. You look one way through your binoculars and you see an exhausted 14-year-old on guard duty holding a $3,000 rifle, and he or she is beginning to nod off. What are your chances of success there? Conversely, you look the other way through your binoculars and see 10 alert and vigilant adults holding old, inexpensive .30 caliber bolt-action military rifles loaded with inexpensive surplus ammunition. Now the time has come to decide who you will attack. Do you attack 10 adults with old .30 caliber military rifles, or a sleepy 14-year-old holding a state-of-the-art $3,000 rifle? The choice is obvious. Hostiles may be dumb, but they're not stupid. They can count, and one sleepy shooter is easier to outmaneuver than 10 alert shooters, regardless of the technology. The third criteria is the long-term strategy. With unproven Me and Mine strategies, the goal is to survive the initial event. After that, you work things out as you go along. However, this is when the future becomes less focused and more fuzzy. The single greatest failing of this simplistic logic is the assumption that we only need to survive one major catastrophic event. That's typical disaster thinking, not tribulation thinking, because we will have long periods of relative quiescence that will be punctuated by brief moments of cataclysm. This awareness is the very foundation upon which the strategy of enlightened continuity and comfort rests. So, what does this all boil down to? Me and Mine strategy thinkers will survive the initial event, and while they are busy congratulating themselves for being clever, they'll likely be blindsided by the next major cataclysm of the tribulation. On the other hand, those who embrace the strategy of enlightened continuity and comfort will likewise survive the initial event. However, instead of congratulating themselves, they will be busy using the next period of quiescence to prepare themselves for the next major cataclysm event. Here is where you will play a vital role by being in service to the leadership of a faith-based survival community, especially at the outset. When you first encounter leaders at the initial stage, expect them to be focused on immediate issues of concern, using what folks refer to as conventional wisdom. When you first encounter leaders at the initial stage, expect them to be focused on immediate issues of concern, using what folks refer to as conventional wisdom. This is a pitfall because there is nothing conventional about wisdom. It is wise or unwise, and that is all. However, the lure of conventional wisdom is that it can make unwise options appear attractive. To illustrate the point, let me share with you one of the deadliest conventional wisdom mistakes I see people make. We learned in part 2 of our series that left-brain thinkers comprise 95% of the American population, and that 90% of all Americans do not want to know about bad news in their future. Consequently, the vast majority of Americans are more likely to be in denial and will therefore be more likely to perish in the coming tribulation. However, sometimes they do experience a brief moment of awareness. And since 95% of all Americans are left-brain consumers, there is a quick fix to calm these fleeting moments of uncertainty. If they buy something, they'll feel better. That's the fix. It happens when doubts about the future compel them to drive to the store and buy what conventional wisdom tells them is survival food. Those 5-gallon buckets of freeze-dried emergency food that offer consumers a big bang for the buck, with light weight, long shelf life, convenient prepackaged meals, and lots of calories for very little money. What's not to like? Actually, quite a bit. While the companies who sell these freeze-dried foods often have the word survival in their company name, they always use the term emergency food instead of survival food, and for good reason. It is not survival food. If you take a close look at the small print, you'll see that most of the calories in these 5-gallon buckets comes from vegetables, soups, and drinks as opposed to protein sources. Yet, the conventional wisdom shopper allure of these products persists. Why? Well, let's take a closer look at this with the help of the late great comedian George Carlin.
Everybody's got to have a little place for their stuff. That's all life is about. That's the meaning of life. Trying to find a place to keep your stuff. That's all your house is. Think of it. That's all your house is. It's a place to keep your stuff.
Now let's take a look at this from the perspective of an enlightened continuity and comfort strategist. What conventional wisdom consumers continually fail to do is to consider the circumstances under which they'll use their emergency food and how. After all, we do live in a modern world. Turn a handle, and there is water. Choose a heat setting, and you're cooking on a stovetop. It all works now, so why shouldn't it work later? This is conventional wisdom. What is not conventional is an emergency where all of our switches, levers, and handles become useless decorations. And given that the majority of humanity lives along a coastline, that means that tribulation emergencies will include sudden evacuations as well. With this in mind, let's go on the road and take the stuff out of the 5-gallon bucket and use it under these circumstances. In this case, there's an old saying, water is life, So this is the first issue. As a general rule of thumb, it takes 1 cup of potable water to rehydrate 1 ounce of freeze-dried food. In other words, you need approximately 1 canteen of water for each family member for each meal. This during a time when there is no turning a kitchen tap for water, and bottled water has long disappeared from store shelves. Now you're going to have to find it and purify it. And if you think boiling water is all you need to do to make it safe to drink, you're wrong. In order to prepare your freeze-dried emergency meal, you are also going to need fuel for a fire, which means you're going to have to spend time foraging about for firewood. This on top of all of the time you need to spend finding and purifying potable water so that you can rehydrate your freeze-dried emergency food. Then you have to prepare your freeze-dried meal over a campfire, which means you are cooking. During the day, people can see the smoke from your fire. At night, they will see the light from your campfire. Either way, if they are half-starved to death, they'll know that you're preparing a meal and where to find you. Then, it's guess who's coming to dinner. Do you really believe that half-starved people are going to walk into your campsite and say, "Oh my, you're so clever. We just wanted to come by and congratulate you before we all go off and starve to death"? The point here is that these freeze-dried products are designed for camping during good times. Therefore, one should not confuse freeze-dried camping food with freeze-dried emergency food. This is why it is better to stockpile survival foods you do not have to rehydrate to cook, whether they be MREs, meals ready to eat, or canned food. You'll be able to eat them quickly without exposing yourself to harm or wasting the better part of your day fetching fuel and water and then cooking meals. That being said, there are excellent uses for freeze-dried foods during the tribulation. For safe shelter locations, these products offer an excellent way to store protein, such as eggs, meat, fish, and fowl. As to the high-calorie, low-protein drinks and soups in these buckets, this will become the junk food of the tribulation. The point here is that you should stockpile high-protein freeze-dried foods for your survival shelter or bunker because they offer 2 long-term asset advantages. First, they will offer an excellent source of protein for the lean times. And second, when things eventually become better, they will become a very valuable form of barter currency, more valuable than gold and silver. However, as someone in awareness, the most important long-term asset you can possess is the survival power of perpetual Genesis. Perception is everything, and the philosophy of perpetual Genesis offers a unique perspective on what is going to happen and your role in it. I discuss this philosophy in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a faith-based leadership guide. So let me focus briefly on the key points relevant to this program. Most mainstream religions have a terrestrial view of God. There's ourselves, our houses of worship, our nations, and so forth. Beyond all of that is God. On the other hand, perpetual Genesis offers a cosmic view of ourselves and God, and it begins with 3 simple questions. Where does God live? What does God do? And what has this got to do with me? For those of you who are still wrestling with the question, does God really exist? There is an old expression. There are no atheists in a foxhole. For those in our church, God is a given, and a very real one at that. If you haven't figured this out by now, all we can do is wish you the best of luck. This now brings us to the first question. Where does God live? We know that we live within God's creation. But where does God live within all that there is? That being the endless void which extends far beyond the reality of the creation we exist within. This is because our world, and all the stars that twinkle at night above our heads, only represent about 5% of all there is. Ergo, creation occupies a portion of the endless void of the cosmos, which is comprised of dark energy and dark matter, the other 95% of all there is. Therefore, while we live within the creation of God, God lives within the endless void of the cosmos. Ergo, God is not all there is. Rather, God is continually expanding creation into the void, which brings us to the second question. What does God do? To all things there is a purpose, and God's mission is the perpetual creation of life from the lifelessness of the void. Hence the term, perpetual genesis. One cannot create something from nothing, which is an important fact when we talk about God's purpose. So how is creation made? It is made from the vast unlimited expanse of dark energy and dark matter that fills the entire void. This is why freedom is vital to God's mission. Without freedom, there is no free will, and free will is the energizing force of intention. This is vital because it is through an act of intention that a universe with its own physical laws can become part of the ever-expanding multiverse we call creation. This brings us to the third question of perpetual genesis. What has this got to do with me? Well, what it has to do with you is that you must make an eternal choice as an eternal being. When you say to God, I'm with you, this is when you become a perpetual. The pledge is simple. God, today I'm incarnated in this body, on this planet, and in this time. When my job of being in service to your mission is completed here, then put me where you need me. No matter which universe, time, planet, or species, I will hit the ground running and never look back. As perpetuals, how do we serve God's mission in this time, on this world, and incarnated in this species? We do it by helping this species along its path of ascension, so that it may become more enlightened, and therefore more effective in serving God's mission of perpetual genesis. At present, humanity stands at the threshold of ascension, and here is the silver lining in this dark cloud of tribulation. During this suffering, our species will be freed from the shackles of slavery, so that we may ascend beyond the exploitation and subjugation of empire to a new existence, one where acquisition is no longer our driving motive. So, how will we know if we have achieved this, that we have truly ascended as a species? That is simple. Our driving motive will become that of harmony, harmony within ourselves and all that is about us. Herein is a classic conflict of good and evil that is happening with our species at this time. Dark entities exist on the physical as well as many other planes, and their battle against our ascension is an existential one for them, because we are their primary source of life force energy. Life force energy only comes from following the path of light and love to God. and dark entities can neither make it nor exist without it. Starved of life force energy, they will inevitably sink into the inky blackness of oblivion, there to meet their final fate, death eternal. It is why they need to steal life force energy from us by fomenting the worst within us. When they do, it is easy for them to suckle our energy. But when we ascend, as is our right as a species, we will be beyond their dark manipulations, and they will lose a major food source. This is why humanity now faces a momentous conflict of good and evil. If we ascend, we free ourselves of these parasites. But if they can hold us back, they know they'll be able to milk us to satisfy their own needs for countless generations of humanity to come. Obviously, these dark entities will not sink quietly into the darkness of oblivion, and for those of us in awareness as perpetuals, we know who we must oppose and what must be done. Yet, with the heavy burden of this momentous responsibility comes a joyful, life-affirming hope for freedom and ascension. This is the cosmic perception of perpetual Genesis, one that fills us with a greater purpose and the will to overcome the hardships of the tribulation. For those of you in awareness as teachers, mentors, and comforters, this philosophy of perpetual Genesis will likely be seen as an overreach, so use discretion in sharing this knowledge. Make sure that those you gift with this knowledge are ready to receive it. As for the rest, remember that perpetual Genesis is more than a philosophy. It is a toolkit, and to see some of the other tools, let's organize our toolkit into 3 simple categories that everyone can understand and agree upon: mind, body, and soul. With that, let's begin with the mind. Let's imagine that you need to sail hundreds of miles across the Pacific Ocean in a small boat, with absolutely no navigational aids whatsoever. A left-brained thinker will likely say, "You mean no GPS navigation? Not even a compass and a sextant? Are you crazy? You'll get lost and die out there." And you know, for left-brained thinkers, that makes perfect sense. But the ancient Polynesian people did exactly that. In fact, they were the first humans to navigate by the rising and setting points of the stars, and by observing ocean swells, currents, and prevailing winds. This is how they used their left brain. But all of that could not have worked without their vital right brain functions, because they used their ability to memorize every waypoint of their journey. A right brain process of using images to form precise memories. This, in turn, enabled them to internalize the clock of the universe. A very right-brained, holistic application of synthesis through insight and perception. No doubt if the ancient Polynesian navigators could be tested today for brain dominance metrics, the question would not be how many of them were left-brain dominant. Rather, the question would be how many of them were balanced whole-brain or right-brained dominance thinkers. This is because they use their right brain functions to closely observe and analyze the environment and to navigate it with a holistic understanding of ocean currents, prevailing winds, and so forth. This is why these ancient mariners were so successful in populating so many small islands in the largest ocean on our planet. And yet they were only using a portion of their right brain functions. So have things changed? No. In Part 2 of this series, we learned that American intelligence agencies favor the use of remote viewers. Like the Polynesian navigators, they too only use a portion of their right brain functions. But what about accessing and using all of our lower and higher right brain functions? For those of you in awareness, here is some good news. You are not encumbered by earthly limitations. Rather, you have the ability to use the cosmic transceiver in your right brain for both lower and higher functions. What does that mean? The higher function of your right brain cosmic transceiver enables you to create two-way ethereal connections across the veil to the other side, regardless of what you call it, God, Yahweh, divine guides, and so forth. Your right brain cosmic transceiver offers you unlimited access to the other side for divine help and inspiration. This kind of empowerment is life-changing, and if you are just starting out, let me give you a suggestion. Psychic techniques such as channeling and auto-writing are the most powerful, but they are risky. This is because if you do not know how to shield yourself, you can be manipulated by dark entity imposters. So these powerful techniques are not something you want to learn on your own. Rather, you need to learn these techniques with the help of an advanced mentor. This is why I suggest that you begin with remote viewing. This technique does not expose you to the imposter risk and is a powerful way to learn the self-discipline needed for more advanced techniques, such as channeling and auto-writing. There are excellent seminars and home study courses offered on the Internet. I personally learned remote viewing in a seminar offered by Major Ed Dames, and I know without a doubt this is a very powerful survival skill, one that is well worth your time to learn. However, even before you begin any formal studies, there is something enjoyable you can begin doing today. It is a simple 10-step meditation exercise I've created to help you access your lower and higher right brain functions more effectively. You may be thinking, why meditation? It is because experts agree that meditation is the best way to enhance your right brain functionality. If you are already using a meditation technique or are trained in one that you like, you can adapt it to this 10-step program, which is designed to enhance your right brain functionality for tribulation survival needs. For this presentation, I'm going to use Danjun Breathing, a program we publish. Our complete Danjun Breathing system features a color handbook and 6 DVDs. We also sell the less expensive exercise DVDs. For this 10-step program, we are going to use the Clarity exercise featured on our Low Impact Exercise DVD. The Low Impact Clarity exercise is easy to do, and it is perfect for the 10-step right brain meditation technique I'm going to share with you. You can learn more about this at feelbetteronyourown.com. For those of you who are already practicing meditation, feel free to add elements of this exercise to your present routine. So, let's get started. Step 1 is to schedule a time of day when you can visit a nearby park for a peaceful and uninterrupted experience. Be sure to let someone know where you're going and when you'll be back. Step 2. No slavetronics. Leave your tablet, laptop, smartphone, and other handheld devices behind. Turning these devices off so you can take them with you will not work. This is because the mere possession of them will distract you. Step 3. Find a location you like with a strong sensation of life force energy, ideally near a tree. Your spot must be surrounded by life force energy, also known as chi, ki, or prana. Step 4. You need to ground yourself, so weather permitting, remove your shoes and socks. You need to be barefooted for best results. Step 5. A great way to quickly release negative energy is to hug a tree. Lean into the tree with your body and wrap your arms around it. Send thoughts of love to the tree and ask it to drain away your stresses by grounding you to the earth. As you do, imagine the process happening in your mind, as negative energy in your body is drawn out of you by the tree and redirected downward into the ground. Step 6. Once you feel grounded, it is time to prepare for your still state. Thank the tree and find a comfortable place nearby to lay down if you are using the Danjan breathing clarity exercise. For other methods, sitting cross-legged on the ground works just as well. It is okay to use a thin blanket for comfort, as long as you can feel the contour of the ground beneath you. Step 7. Now you must enter a still state using Danjan breathing or another meditation technique of your choice. In a still state, your mind is clear, your body is relaxed, and your breathing is steady, comfortable, and controlled. When you reach the last pose of the Danjan breathing clarity exercise, you will be in a still state, provided you faithfully follow the exercise instructions. Remember, this is not a strengthening exercise, so never push into pain. Step 8. Once you have achieved a still state, it is time to experience your surroundings. If you are lying down, slowly change to a cross-legged pose near the tree. It is okay to use a thin blanket as long as you can feel the contour of the ground beneath you. Make sure your breathing is steady and paced and that your mind is clear. Then begin experiencing the world around you with as many of your senses as possible. It is not important to use all of your senses at once, but rather, it is better to explore them sequentially, one at a time. Do not evaluate what your senses detect. Just experience what they do detect as you keep your mind perfectly still. Everything you've done so far in the first 8 steps have prepared you for the most important part of this exercise. Earlier, I told you about the ancient Polynesians, and now they navigated vast distances of the Pacific using a style of right-brain navigation that combined free association, synthesizing, and holistic thinking to observe the world about them for navigation clues. During the coming tribulation, a similar right-brained approach to survival will help you become more adept at finding water, shelter, and sustenance. And this is just a mere token of what is possible. So let's move on to the next step. With step 9, you will explore the 4 spheres of the world around you. They are the lithosphere, the ground beneath you, the hydrosphere, all of the surface water on our planet, the biosphere, which is comprised of all life on the planet, and finally, the atmosphere, all of the gases between the lithosphere below us and the fringe of space above us. Unlike the previous step, where you sequentially focused on each of your senses, you want to begin experiencing and observing synergistic interactions between the 4 spheres. For example, feel the sun on your face. Imagine its warmth working its way down along your body and into the ground beneath you. Hear the sound of water trickling in a nearby fountain and children at play in the distance. Smell the scent of flowers in bloom and insects gathering nectar. This is the most important step in the exercise, so for best results, never begin with expectations. Likewise, never consciously analyze what you're experiencing. If you do, your left brain will begin to dominate your awareness, causing you to lose the right brain benefits of the experience. This is essential to building your right brain functions. And when you are doing this, as you should, something wonderful can happen. From out of nowhere, an epiphany or vision can come to you. It could be a powerful insight into nature or the meaning of something you never saw before. Whatever it is, simply acknowledge it. Again, do not let your left brain steal the show. And finally, we come to step 10, completion. When you are finished, slowly and methodically gather yourself and your things together and leave. As you return to your home or office, delay thinking about material matters for as long as possible. Rather, use this quality time to contemplate what you've experienced. Relish these impressions, like a butterscotch candy slowly dissolving in your mouth. Speaking of things that are tasty, some are very tasty, and at the same time, very deadly for tribulation survivors. A tribulation death food is any food that stimulates the growth of harmful yeast and bacteria in your gut. Eat this food, and you will become stricken with debilitating bowel issues, lethargy, lack of clarity, and other complaints. Worst of all, tribulation death foods will increase the chances of you succumbing to disease. The reason for this is that 70% of the body's immune system is in the gut, which is why Hippocrates warns us that all disease starts in the gut. Therefore, to mitigate the negative effects of tribulation death food, we need to avoid them, and if we cannot, we need to find ways to suppress the growth of Candida yeast in our gut and to keep a healthy balance of bacteria. Even in the best of times and circumstances, we can never eliminate bad bacteria, so we do the next best thing. We manage it. The goal is to maintain a ratio of 80% good bacteria to 20% bad bacteria. As a teacher, mentor, and comforter, you need to impress upon the community leaders that any food that impairs the immune system is a tribulation death food. For this reason, when stockpiling survival supplies, it is best to avoid highly processed or packaged non-organic foods. If you must stockpile manufactured foods, be sure they contain no GMO, pesticides, chemicals, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, or artificial sweeteners. And what about those flavored coffees we enjoy at Starbucks? While there are pros and cons about coffee and health, most flavored coffee drinks contain far more sugar than a can of Coke. This is important because sugar is the favorite food of bad bacteria in the gut as well as cancer cells. The point being, if you want to enjoy coffee, just learn to drink it black and skip the sugar and artificial sweeteners. For those who wonder why modern foods contain these harmful ingredients, please remember what we learned in the second part of this series, Nibiru Pole Shift, Who Lives, Who Dies, about the agenda of the 1% of the 1% who control our world. Their goal is to reduce the global population so they can restore their enslavement of our species after the tribulation has passed. Ergo, the harmful ingredients their corporations put into our food are setting us up to fail during the tribulation. Consequently, stockpiling the best possible foods for survival will be difficult and expensive. However, there is a way to mitigate the negative effects with a probiotic strategy. There are essentially two probiotic options, supplemental and natural. A good thing to stockpile for the tribulation will be probiotic supplements. When shopping for supplements, there are 3 things to look for when evaluating competitive formulations. 7 or more unique strains of gut-friendly bacteria is one. Make sure they are acid and bile resistant. This is necessary so they can get the good bacteria to where it is needed. And be mindful of the CFU's value, colony-forming units. In general, the more the better. I firmly believe that probiotics are a stockpiling must for the tribulation, so please do not rush into this, as the cost of these supplements varies widely, and paying more does not necessarily mean you'll get more. This is why I strongly urge you to take the time to thoroughly research this topic so that you can make an informed buying decision on your own. And please, be sure to shop with merchants you already know and trust. In addition to probiotic supplements, you should also incorporate natural probiotics into your stockpiling plans as well. Excellent sources are pickled and fermented foods, and at the top of the list is a Korean favorite, kimchi. Made from salted and fermented vegetables such as cabbage and radishes, it is a powerful probiotic and one you can learn to make yourself. Another is kombucha, an ancient Chinese fermented, sweetened tea drink you can brew at home. While you can find it in the store, I prefer to brew it myself. Amongst its many benefits is that it is a great way to fight candida because it contains live probiotic cultures. As with probiotic supplements, I strongly urge you to learn about natural probiotics and how to make them yourself. Then start making them today so that you'll know exactly what to do during the tribulation. When it comes to stockpiling, here's the bottom line. The 1% of the 1% who control the world from the shadows wants us to die in vast numbers. It is why their food corporations are setting us up to fail during the tribulation, and why it is virtually impossible to defend ourselves against this without breaking the bank. But with a strong probiotic strategy, you can mitigate enough of this damage to make a real difference. There is also another thing you can do to mitigate the negative effects of harmful ingredients to our gut. It's called Danjan breathing. It does not require a formulation or a food. It is an ancient Korean self-healing energy art that traces its roots back to the early days of acupuncture. It is widely practiced in Korea and is slowly becoming popular in America. Most who study Danjan breathing in America come from other disciplines such as yoga and Reiki, and are very advanced in their practice. They study and adopt Danjan breathing so they can include it within their existing health and wellness regimes. The remainder of those who begin the practice of Danjan breathing in America do it for low back pain. Given the gentle method of this art, it is highly effective in helping low back pain sufferers. In my own case, I began the practice of Danjan breathing because I was stricken with a very severe case of irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, a problem that will be sure to haunt tribulation survivors. After 2 weeks, I was symptom-free after doing Danjan breathing for just 20 minutes each day. After 3 months, I was completely healed, and I was free to eat whatever I liked. To learn more about Danjan breathing, visit feelbetteronyourown.com. And now, one final thought on natural remedies before we move on. When you begin researching this and other natural solutions on the internet, you are going to find a lot of misleading and disparaging information, such as articles telling you that these natural solutions are not good for you because their benefits have not been proved, or that they are actually dangerous. Before you give these attacks the benefit of the doubt, please understand one simple point. While there are those who believe they're being honest and through integrity put their names and faces before the public, there are many more who are far less forthcoming. In fact, the more you try to learn about them, the less you come to know about them and their true agendas. This is how the majority of negative attacks are spread across the internet by paid disinformationalists. Elusive people with multiple paper-thin personas. Before you put your life and the lives of those you love in the hands of such people, think about it, because there is only one person who truly deserves the benefit of the doubt. You, and you alone. Now that we've added mind and body tools to our Perpetual Genesis toolbox, it's time to take a soulful look at your role in the coming tribulation. After months, if not years into the tribulation, there will come the darkest of days, when it will not matter how well equipped or well provisioned you are. Because during these dark days, you will lurch from one crisis to the next, with an unending sense of suffering and an absence of hope for the future. It will be in these dark days when some lay their heads down to sleep at night and pray, "Dear God, I am so weary of this world. Please take me in my sleep." If they've lived good lives and are worthy, God may answer their prayers. If not, it will mean they have something more to learn in this life, and they will awaken to another day of tribulation. But if they are fortunate, you, as a sensitive with the ability to see others holistically, will understand their pain. This is when you will sit beside them and gently place a helping hand upon their shoulder. Then you will softly say, "How is your world today?" When they talk, you will listen respectfully. And when they ask, "What's the point of carrying on?" you will pause for a brief moment before answering as you turn to look them directly in the eyes. When you see them searching your eyes for compassion and insight, is the moment when you will share with them a message of hope for the future. It must be neither glib nor extemporaneous. Rather, what you will share with them will be your vision of a better life, one that helps you to carry on as well. It is why those who join our church create this vision in their own Mission Victory Plan, or MVP for short. The MVP is the first tool our members add to their Perpetual Genesis Survival Toolkit, and it begins with a vision of success on the backside. A time beyond the tribulation years, when we see blue skies and taste sweet waters once again. This is a vision so you do not tell it with words. Rather, you show it with words, with what we call IMAX clarity. This will be the vision you share with that sad soul facing another dark day, and whose prayer for the relief from life went unanswered. You must become a helping hand in the community if you are to succeed as a teacher, mentor, and comforter. You must be seen by one and all as much more than the eyes and ears of the leadership. Yes, when leaders look up, they need to see the print of your helping hand everywhere in the community. But the same is true for the community members as well. They too must see the prints of your helping hand everywhere. It is why your helping hand strategy needs to be simple. If you focus all of your efforts on the needs of just a few to the exclusion of the many, you will not be seen as a helping hand. Rather, you may come to be seen as an emotional crutch that can be ill afforded by a community hard-pressed by the daily business of tribulation survival. On the other hand, if you devote yourself to being a helping hand for as many as you can each day, then you will become valuable. Your job will be those brief, caring moments when you let others know that they are not alone, not to commiserate over irreconcilable griefs and complaints. Rather, seek those eager to learn new skills of value to the community, if given the right kind of help. When you do, then find others in the community capable and willing to be of service to them, and introduce them together with that very purpose in mind. In the process, the sharing of useful self-sufficiency knowledge will help each of them to feel greater hope for the future. This is what it means to be a helping hand. To learn more, read my book, Survival Wellness Advocacy and the Big Win. Print editions are available for purchase, but the e-book version is free on our website at knowledgemountain.org. We hope you'll use the information in this book to see if our strategy for surviving the tribulation appeals to you. We've covered a lot of ground in this 3-part series, and so now I want to leave you with the most important thing to remember. If you only remember one thing, this is that one thing to remember. Surviving the coming Planet X tribulation is not about holding on to things. It is about holding on to each other. And I'll leave it on that note. So until the next time we meet, remember Marshall's motto: destiny comes to those who listen, and fate finds the rest. So learn what you can learn, do what you can do, and never give up hope. For the Knowledge Mountain Church of Perpetual Genesis, I'm Marshall Masters.
This program was made possible by the Knowledge Mountain Church of Perpetual Genesis. To learn more, visit knowledgemountain.org. We also encourage you to pursue your awareness path by reading Marshall's book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a faith-based leadership guide. To learn more, visit planetxtribulation.com. This concludes this 3-part series,
which is based on the 3 founding precepts of our church. Those are self-sufficiency, hope for the future, and knowing you are not alone. Now let's bring this down to a first contact level, where you, as someone in awareness, will be a teacher, mentor, and comforter for the leadership of a survival community. Remember, as someone in awareness, you're not coming into the community from the bottom, but rather the top. With this in mind, let us now compare these 2 strategies using the following 3 criteria: historical efficacy, survival safety, and long-term strategy. When we look at the criteria of historical efficacy, 2 keywords jump out at us: unproven and proven. Me and mine strategies are based on unproven Cold War sheltering strategies, which means that there is no historical basis that proves these strategies can be a member of a faith-based survival community, and how to profile potential tribulation leaders, so that you could be worth your weight in beans. I also pointed out in the first part that we do not use the term tribulation in any biblical or judgmental sense. Rather, we use it exactly as the word tribulation is defined in the dictionary, that being a severe trial or suffering. In part 2 of this series, Nibiru Poleshift, Who Lives, Who Dies, you learned about the 3 major causes of tribulation death: denial, procrastination, and location, and how the vast majority of humanity is destined to fall victim to these causalities, something I call failure programming. And it is the principal mechanism of denial and procrastination. An example of failure programming includes fixed outcome beliefs that completely
Welcome to Two Suns in the Sky, Who Lives, Who Dies. To learn more about this 3-part audiobook series, visit twosunsinthesky.com. And now, Part 3, The Survival Power of Perpetual Genesis, with author and narrator Marshall Masters.
Hello, I'm Marshall Masters, Chief Steward of the Knowledge Mountain Church of Perpetual Genesis. In Part 1 of this 3-part series, Purposeful Survival for an Enlightened Future, you learn that as a person in awareness, it does not matter if you cannot afford to buy a mountain of beans. This is because you were shown a plan on how to become a values and awareness who have committed themselves to the role of being teachers, mentors, and comforters. You will also learn specific ways to use the survival power of Perpetual Genesis to help faith-based survival community leaders to free themselves from failure programming, so they can become more effective in leading their flocks to safety. I'll also share with you body, mind, and soul insights to make you an effective and beloved boots-on-the-ground member of a survival community. With this in mind, let's quickly review the survival strategy of enlightened continuity and comfort we learned about in the first part of this series. In the first part of this series, we introduced the strategy of enlightened continuity and comfort, or ECC for short. Ignore an important law of survival, that if you are not resourceful, you die. Fixed outcome beliefs are typically rooted in theories that maintain a last-minute intervention will occur. Those who subscribe to these will be moved out of harm's way at the last minute by divine beings, ancestors, extraterrestrials, multidimensional beings, and so forth. Therefore, a basic tenet of these fixed outcome beliefs is that resourcefulness is irrelevant for those willing to put all of their options into a single fixed outcome basket. To that we say, best of luck. This is why in the final part of this 3-part series, we're going to offer an alternative to fixed outcome belief systems. I call it Perpetual Genesis, and it is much more than a philosophy. It is a cosmic tribulation toolkit for those